Hello, everyone. Professor Thompson here. I'm going to touch upon the topic of credibility for a few minutes and try and hit upon some of the key points that I would have wanted to convey to you had we been in class today. So, on this subject, I'm hoping that this is not an unfamiliar topic to you. I really hope that you've had some exposure to this. I do know that in chapter 2 of our Talk Like TED book, it did talk about ethos, pathos, and logos. And so the idea of ethos or speaker credibility has been at least brought to your attention in some way in my class, which is a positive thing. Um, Speaker credibility is very important to me as somebody who takes in thousands of different messages a day, encounters thousands of student speeches a semester. I always want to know why you, as a speaker, are knowledgeable, competent, trustworthy, and objective. And those are four pillars that I think about quite frequently. They were introduced to me by a college professor of mine, and her name was Dr. Idalyn Carr. And I always go back to those pillars when I think about why someone is addressing me. And you can see on the screen here that I have copy and pasted a definition from a website that talks about the quality of being trusted and believed in, the quality of being convincing or believable. But I think I come back to this idea that credibility is in your control. As a speaker, you want to do everything in your power to have that audience view us as credible, right? You don't want to make a mistake or put yourself at a disadvantage. You want that audience to see you as trustworthy. You want that audience to see you as knowledgeable, and so you want to control the event. You want to control your message and do everything you can to be successful as somebody addressing other people. So let's dive into a couple key elements that I like to touch on in my class. There are three different aspects of credibility that I want you to walk away from remembering. And one is, what is initial credibility? Two is, what is derived credibility? And three, what is terminal credibility? Okay. They all are very interrelated in some fashion, and they're all going to be a part of your public speaking experience. So if you look at these pictures that I have on this PowerPoint slide, which of these people would you want representing you in court? Would you want this guy that looks like he's homeless? Would you want the gentleman who looks like he's been on the beach for 2 weeks and hasn't showered and is wearing outrageous clothing? Or would you want one of these other two well-dressed, smiling individuals representing you in court? They look the part, and that's part of what initial credibility is about. Initial credibility happens before the message actually begins. So I want you to think about what are the components or pieces that are happening before you actually get up in front of an audience and speak. First of all, appearance matters, right? Clothing, what are we wearing? Okay, how does that communicate something about us? Does it show that we're relaxed? Does it show that we're taking the event seriously and that we consider it formal? Again, these pictures, if I was going to court, which it could be a matter of whether I'm locked up or free, I want a person who's going to look that part and look like they belong there, that's respecting the order of the court, and so forth. So, again, what are you going to be wearing to class on the day of your presentation? How does that reflect your seriousness of your speech or of your topic or of your experience? I tend to put very few restrictions on clothing because I want you to make those decisions. You're going to notice for the IAI speeches that I do put some small things like don't wear a t-shirt or don't wear a hat, but I want the control to be in your hands so that I can see how you are handling this experience. The other thing that I would really throw out there is that your nonverbal actions matter. What are you doing before the speech? Are you walking up and down the aisles acting like you're nervous? Are you telling people in the audience or in the class that you're nervous and you're communicating that? One of the things that I definitely don't like is when I come to a class and I'm sitting there getting ready to watch the speeches for a day, and I have 3 or 4 students who are like, I'm so nervous. I don't know if I can do this. Well, to me, not only is that a defeatist attitude, but it really kind of shows me that you don't believe in yourself. So why should I believe in you if you're having a hard time believing in yourself? You're trusting that maybe you aren't prepared or you don't know as much as you think you know about this topic. And why am I supposed to now all of a sudden believe you in 2 or 3 or 10 minutes when you give that speech? So I want you to really be aware of what you're doing and how you're acting and what you're saying before you give a presentation. And I think that that's a good message, whether it's in my class or another class. All right, so the final bullet I have on the slide says, what do we know about the person? So there are times in which we will experience speakers, and you may be one of these speakers sometimes, where we're unfamiliar to the audience. And so I always would recommend that if we know nothing about you as a speaker, that we figure out who you are before the event. So if you ever go to a conference, if you've ever been a part of a graduation, there's always somebody who gets up and gives a little 30-second spiel about a person that says, here's their qualifications. Here's what we should know about that person. And so that we get to know and we hear that they have degrees or qualifications or have accomplished something special. That helps guide whether or not we are going to consider them competent and trustworthy before they even start talking. And in some cases, it will be you. Do we as an audience view you as competent before you start speaking? In the context of our class, where I don't want somebody to get up and introduce you as a speaker before each of our speeches in class, I want you to think about, what do we know about you as a person already? You know, have you talked about having kids? Have you talked about playing sports? Have you talked about a military experience? Have you mentioned where you went to high school or what you like to do on weekends? You've all had opportunities to introduce yourself on the first day, to do the reintroduction speech in our follow-up class. And so as your disclosure has increased, we are beginning to categorize you and make judgments about you. And that's completely natural. So I want you to think about, what do people know about me? What do I know about the people that are going to be talking? And how can I use that to my advantage, right? If people know that I have military experience and I've served and I've done tours and I've talked a little bit about that, if I'm talking about a military topic or people know that I'm going to be talking about that, I tend to get the benefit of the doubt before my formal message has started. You know, or if I'm going to talk about kids or raising kids, you know that I have kids. And so I can talk about that from a place of experience, and you give, as an audience, an amount of leeway towards that. So that's something to think about as initial credibility and things to consider heading into a message. All right. The second thing that I want to mention is derived credibility. And this is the credibility that we develop during a message. Okay, so once we officially get in front of an audience and we start speaking, what are we doing in front of that audience to make ourselves more believable and trustworthy? Remember, body language is important. It doesn't matter what your skin color is, or whether you're tall or short or heavy or thin. If you're engaging, you're engaging. If you can have some personality up there and you can give people eye contact, that matters, and that is important. So be aware of how you're using your hands, what direction you're looking. Those things are going to play an important part of your success. And you need to think about those things as you practice your speech. So, body language, you're going to hear it all the time. The next thing I want to mention has to do with composition specifically. In my class, there are 3 composition elements that I'm often looking for in messages that help build your speaker credibility in a derived sense. The first has to do with credibility statements. These are specific lines in your speech that tell us that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so for instance, if I was talking about baseball, I might throw in a line to the effect of, as I played baseball for 14 years of my life and coached baseball at both the high school and collegiate level for 7 years, I feel like I'm very informed to be able to share my experiences on offensive strategy. You see, I'm really blowing up that example, but the example is important. I can throw in these tidbits that specifically state why I know what I know and why you might not know as much as I do. Okay, so credibility statements are sometimes that blunt, throwing it out. Here's why I know my stuff. The second form is what the book Talk Like Ted really emphasizes in chapter 2, which is personal narrative. I'm a huge fan of personal stories. As the chapter talked about, our brains light up, our brains sync when we hear stories. So I think it's a very important element of our speaking experiences. So, I tend to lean towards how can we incorporate more stories in our messages, in our daily lives, no matter what class you're in. I think if you can incorporate stories, that you're going to be more successful. You become more relatable. You are seen oftentimes even as more objective, because you can see it from a framework in which you can share that experience and make it relatable to all types of people. So I want you to think about the difference, right? I could talk about and be very blunt about, well, I've played baseball for 15 years, or I could begin to tell a personal story about what it's like to be a coach at the college level, or I could tell a story about my experience coaching at the high school level, and really illuminate that experience, and that illumination really leads to why you should trust me and trust my message. So this first speech is all about personal narrative. And so really built in, inherent to what you're speaking about, we're going to understand you better. So I don't want you to incorporate a personal narrative inside a personal narrative, but just realize that your ability to do IAI 1, this first speech, I'm building the framework for where we're going in IAI 2. Because in IAI 2, the personal narrative is going to be one element in the larger speech that you're going to be required to do. So I look forward to kind of, laying the foundation here, making sure that you're telling a good story, that you're detail oriented, and then we're going to take in IAI 2 the experience of telling a story and have it be a part of the third body point in your next speech. Okay, and then the third and final thing that you'll see on here is oral source citation. As I've said before in the oral source citation video, oral sources really show your ability to do research. At times it can show how objective you can be by finding different points of view. It can show that what you're saying is not just your opinion and it's supported by facts, or it's supported by other people's similar opinions that have been maybe based and rooted in their own personal narratives. So oral source citation is where you verbally bring into your message those pieces of evidence. And you can see over here, I've copied a small snippet from the College of DuPage library oral citation page with some examples. If you watched the other video, you saw me mention some things about oral source citations, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. Finally, and my kind of final core slide here has to do with terminal credibility. Terminal credibility is what happens after you finish your final statement. I highly recommend that when you finish your final thought, your parting wisdom, parting shot, that you simply say thank you to your audience. You have good eye contact when you say thank you. And then what comes after that thank you? That's the start of terminal credibility. First, body language matters again. If you walk over to the trash can and throw away all of your notes, you really diminish the authenticity of your message and you diminish the effort that you put into that speech. It's kind of like just throwing your message away. You're saying, thank God that's over with. I didn't want to do it anyway. And so that's the last behavior that I want to see someone do. And believe it or not, you would be surprised how many students have done that. I think one of the other things that you want to make sure you're doing is if you're talking about a topic, you want to make sure your body language and actions after that speech line up with what you talked about in the speech. So for instance, if you gave a speech about living a healthy lifestyle or exercising and putting good things into your body, good nutrients and stuff, we wouldn't want to take a break or see you after class smoking a cigarette. That makes no sense. So make sure that what you're doing aligns with your message when you're done, okay? And then finally, I insist often that anybody can write a speech and anybody can go through enough prep work and training to deliver a speech. But the real kind of test to me and testament to being a good speaker is often your ability to not speak necessarily in an extemporaneous fashion, but when that extemporaneous opportunity or that prepared presentation is over, how can you speak in an impromptu fashion on that topic? So making sure that you understand what you're talking about and you know how to relate and convey that information to other people is a very important skill. So if you were to stand up and give a speech about penguins or about DNA or about the Grateful Dead, there's a fair amount of research that goes into that speech. But then if somebody after that presentation asks you a question, and it's, oftentimes fairly simple questions, and you can't answer them, it really diminishes the entire effort of the previous presentation you just gave. So you want to make sure that you have this kind of thorough body of knowledge about the things that you talk about to other people. This is also one of the primary reasons why in my class, I want you talking about topics that you have firsthand experience with. Okay, so that is my thoughts, my message for you today on credibility. Again, I want you to showcase your knowledge. I want you to showcase your expertise. I want you to make sure that you're thinking about your personal connection and how you are being honest and straightforward with the audience that you're addressing. You're paying credit and tribute to the sources that you use. You are making an effort to have engaging body language during your message to help build that trust and competency aspect of what you're doing and who you are. Pretty simple stuff, right? I thought so. That's it for today, and best of luck to you. I want to encourage you that if you have questions or concerns, you email me, send them my way. Otherwise, we will see you in the very next class, and you have plenty of opportunity in the next class to have your concerns and questions addressed as well. Have a good day.